This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
This is a difficult episode to record just because of the mindset of our wives or our spouses completing us in marriage. And I don't want to sound negative, but the real truth is we shouldn't expect our wives or our husbands to complete us in our marriage. I'm going to dive into that, so stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of the Husband Coach's Corner. Yes, we are in part number 9 of the Marriage Success series, and today we're talking about why our spouse does not complete us in marriage. And I want to really give caution that this idea could be a trap and it's overly romanticized. So that's where a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today comes from. This is not me saying that your wife or your husband is not capable of providing support and, just all of the things that we look for and long for in marriage. That's not what I'm talking about. All right. Now, before we get too far down the rabbit trail, so to speak, I want to make you aware of a few things. The first thing is I have launched a Patreon page. So if that's something you are interested in, this is a community where you can continue to grow as a husband. This is primarily focused for husbands. So if you are a wife listening to this, just know that a lot of the content that's going to be in there is for husbands. What I would do ask is that you don't force your husband to sign up for this. That usually always causes friction in the marriage. You could offer it as a suggestion, but don't be like, yeah, you need to sign up for this husband coach Patreon type thing. All right. But for all the men that listen to this podcast, I strongly encourage you to at least check it out for a month or so. See if it's something that's going to help grow your marriage and if it's beneficial. And if it is, then great. If it's not, then okay. Just let me know what you need to best serve you in the season of life that you're going through. And I'll see if I can deliver on that. All right. Now, if you want to get in contact with me, my email address is going to be in the show notes. You can just go down to the show notes or description, husbandcoach2020@gmail.com. If you don't have the time to go look in there, that is the email address that you can message me at. I do check it usually once a day. Sometimes every other day, just depends on my schedule, but I do check it and I respond to those who send me messages. And my goal is really just to be present and available to help you go through the season of life that you're in as best as I can. All right. So those are the two things that I really wanted to talk about because I want to spend a majority of today's episode really unpacking this idea of our wife or our husband not completing us. And in order for us to be successful, the very first thing that I want everyone who listens to this podcast to understand about themselves is that you have value in your marriage. You have worth in your marriage. And when you say I do, you're not saying I do so that way the other person can complete what you bring as value to the marriage. And that's what I really want to focus in on. All right. We're towards the tail end of the episode. We will discuss a little bit more in detail about the ideas of why this is a thing. But what I really want to talk about or spend the bulk of the episode is combating this mindset and why that's such a problem. Okay. And the very first reason, like just right off the bat, that this is a problem is when you tell yourself that someone else completes you, you become utterly dependent upon that person. All right. Now, it's good to be dependent upon your spouse to a degree. But when you say that this person completes you, then you are essentially saying you have no worth or any value to begin with if this person isn't with you. I know why we say it. It's this whole romanticized thing of, if I say this, it's just really cute and it's poetic. And to that degree, sure, you can say it, right? If you're saying it in a poetic manner. But unfortunately, I've ran into a lot of husbands that they live this idea that their spouse completes them in the manner of, I have to please my wife, otherwise she's going to leave me. And if she leaves me, I'll just be utterly destroyed, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't please our wives. The whole crux of this podcast is to find ways to love our wife every single day. But there's a difference of loving our wives and pleasing our wives. And that comes down to, are you doing it in the idea of fear that she'll leave you? Or are you doing it because you genuinely want to build this relationship? And those are two different mindsets. And that's really what I want the men that listen to this podcast to grasp. And for the wives, I want you to grasp this as well, because your husband shouldn't be completing you, right? If you are going to love your husband and find ways of pleasing him and meeting his needs, then it shouldn't be out of fear that he's going to leave you or go and flirt with someone else or cheat on you or whatever. It should be purely out of the idea that you are committed to one another and that you want to grow in your relationship. That's what I've been talking about for the past 9 or 8 episodes, and it doesn't stop here. But this is a very dangerous place of people thinking, well, I have to complete my spouse, or my spouse must complete me. And I don't even know what that means, other than people saying like, oh, well, I'm afraid that if I do something wrong, then my wife is going to leave me. That's called being held hostage. All right. That is not a successful way of being married. It may work for a few years, but let me tell you, like down the stretch, like down the long haul, you're likely not going to have a rich and fulfilled marriage, because someone's going to end up resenting the other and saying, you know, I just felt like I was trapped and I had nowhere else to go. And I say that because I've encountered people who are experiencing this, and it all came from this romanticizing idea of my spouse completes me. All right. So that is the most dangerous thing that you can come into a marriage with the mindset of. Instead, what I want to give you is a different perspective. I've already talked about, you want to serve your spouse. You want to make sure that they're taken care of. You want to make sure that you're showing them love, affection, affirmation, that you're building them up. You know, the 5 love languages type stuff. That's one aspect. All right. I kind of already touched on that. If you got questions about that, then send me an email and we can talk a little bit deeper. The second aspect of what you should be looking for when you enter into a relationship with a person is developing a true and genuine friendship. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have any friends that complete me. I have friends that I enjoy spending time with. I have friends that I will go and do certain activities with. And I have friends that I won't do certain activities with. I have friends, but I'm okay if my friends are going to walk away from me because they're in a different season of life. Now, the difference with a marriage and with your wife or with your husband is the idea that you don't walk away from marriage, okay? But it's that friendship, the camaraderie. That's what I really want people to understand about marriage. That's what it's about. Yes, we overtalk the word love, but when you get down to the bottom of what love really turns into or where it stems from, it comes from this idea of friendship, this idea of togetherness, all right? And not in a sexual kind of way. My wife and I, before we even were intimately or sexually intimate with one another, we became friends over the phone, long distance relationship, talking about just shenanigans, silly things that really I don't even remember, and I don't even know if she does. But what I do remember is every time we had a conversation and we grew closer to one another, learning each other and understanding where each other was coming from, we grew closer together. And then that formed a very unique friendship. All right. And all the while I was avoiding the friend zone because I made it very clear of what my intentions were, which is to date her and to court her and ultimately to marry her. All right. I was very clear growing up of my intentions. I was probably a oddball. I knew that I wanted to get married. I knew that I wanted to have a family, and I was looking for a mate in high school, all right, for that exact purpose. And I found my wife, and she was also doing the same. Maybe not as intentional as I was, but as we developed our friendship, she realized that that's what I was moving towards, and she wanted to become a part of that. And so we grew that much closer and ultimately got married. And it wasn't perfect, right? I mean, we were teenagers. I was 19, she was 18, but we were friends. In fact, when we were standing in line, because we got married in Vegas, we were standing in line in Vegas at this at the licensing place or whatever. I don't know if it's a courthouse or registered. I don't know, whatever it was, right? We were standing there and we were just talking to each other as if like we weren't nervous. At least I wasn't. I can't speak for her. I don't think she was, but we were just standing there talking. And I remember we were like just having a good time. And you know, we were excited. We're like, hey, we're about to get married. Like, this is about to happen. And once we got our marriage license, you walk outside. And if you know, in Vegas, they hustle you real quick. And we ended up going to, I should probably know where we got married, but I don't. And neither does my wife, by the way. This is a running joke in our marriage. It all happened so fast. But we got into this limo, went to this place where we had our ceremony, and we got married. And afterwards, nothing changed. We were still the friends that we were, but we knew that we had this more connected bond of marriage. And it made our relationship that much more valuable to the both of us. And the point, you know, because I was kind of rambling here, the point that I really wanted to make is friendship is what really sets the tone and the underlying idea of this connectedness and this intimacy, this growth for our marriage. And that can lead us to believing that this person completes me because we enjoy the friendship of this person. You know, and if you just bear with me for a second, I'm not going to get like crazy dark, but when someone that we love or really care about or really enjoy spending time with dies, we are sad that the person died. And depending on your faith and background in what you believe about death, you may or may not have hope. Now, with me being a believer in Christ, I have hope that for those who are in Christ, I'll see again after death of this world. However, there is this idea that when someone dies and you don't get to spend time with them anymore, you lose something. And that's where this romanticized idea of being incomplete now, because I once had this thing, this relationship was designed and centered around me being able to spend time with this person. But now that person is gone, I have this gap and I don't feel as complete as I did when this person was around. I can relate to that in the idea of I used to talk to my dad 2 to 3 times a week. When he passed away in 2020, I lost the ability to call my father and just talk to him about sports or the flowers growing in the garden, random stuff. It didn't matter. I missed, and I still do to this day, I miss that opportunity. But is that to say that I'm no longer complete because my father is gone and I'm missing this time that I'm able to talk to him? The answer to that is no. I'm still a very complete individual because I still have value to bring and a purpose for what God has put me on this earth to complete. All right. Maybe the value comes in these podcasts. Maybe my value comes in the work that I do outside of these podcasts. I know for a fact my value comes in to taking care of my family, both mentally and financially or physically, being able to take care of my family. I know I bring value in that way. So the point that I'm making here, your wife does not complete you, but you should enjoy the time that you get to spend with your wife, and it should be something that brings you joy. Our wives can bring us joy. They can bring us comfort. They can bring us excitement. They can bring us, responsibility. And being given responsibility from our wives is a huge, huge trust factor, because if they say, hey, I trust you to take care of this. Whatever you decide, I'm going to follow you. I trust you to take care of this. That is a huge responsibility that is now resting on the shoulders of you, or on your shoulders. And the same is true when we give responsibility to our wives, right? I give my wife a lot of responsibility and I trust her to follow through with that. But I also give her grace when she's like, I'm not really feeling well and I can't take care of this. It's like, okay, I get it. All right. Now that's a conversation for a different day, but those are things that you should be considering and paying attention to in your relationship. So that way, when your wife is saying like, hey, I'm not able to follow through with the responsibility, you can give her the grace that she needs. So there's no more conflict, or very little conflict on that situation. So we talked about the mindset. We talked about why this is such a huge problem. Now let's talk a little bit more about where we go from here and what is considered to be healthy. Because I did mention some of the stuff that, is for us to be healthy in the relationship, in our marriage. But there's more things that we can do to be healthy when it comes to being fulfilled in our marriage. Because ultimately, this is where, I won't say ultimately, I believe from the many people that I've talked with that are not fulfilled in their marriage in numerous ways, they are more likely to feel incomplete in their marriage. And that's what makes them decide to do different things, either cheat on their spouse, because that's a thing, or they'll decide to do something devious to make their spouse respond, so that way that person feels valued in the relationship. And that's why I wanted to start with, you always need to know that you bring value to your relationship. In your marriage, you bring value. Point blank and period, you do. All right? So what else can we do to strengthen our marriage, to be fulfilled in our marriage? The first thing, you got to find something that you can do with your spouse day in, day out, or at least regularly enough that you are getting the repetitions. And this is going to be different based off of the season of life that you're in, right? If you are in a season of life that is not going to allow you to spend a whole lot of time with your spouse because your job or whatever is going on, well, then you got to modify that, all right? That's nothing different than what I've talked about in previous episodes. And for the wives that are listening to this, just know that sometimes you're going to have to modify things, all right? And this goes both ways, right? You as the wife should be looking for ways to spend time with your husband. You as the husband should be looking for ways to spend time with your wife. Now, that isn't rocket science, right? And hopefully I don't ever drop something that's overly complicated on this podcast. My goal here is to give stuff that you can practically do. Like, you can turn this podcast off and then you can start implementing it. I want to make it that simple, because if it's overly complicated, then you're likely going to feel intimidated and not do it. So if you're like, man, Chris, you made that way too easy, it can't really be that easy. Yes, it actually is that easy. There's a philosophy that some of the biggest problems in life have the simplest solutions. And I am a firm believer that in our marriage, some of the biggest problems that face our marriage and plague marriages actually have the simplest solutions. And it really comes back to the basics. I won't give any more analogies, but I do like the fundamentals. As a former basketball player, understanding the fundamentals of shooting, moving, and communicating on the court, and always moving around when you don't have the ball just to change up the looks on the defense and creating space for other people and making the defense more confused. Yeah, that's a fundamental, right? So the point here, be fundamental, and we'll be good to go. Sorry for the multiple rambles today. You can probably tell I don't have the most notes, because as I was drawing up this the script for this particular episode, it just dawned on me, like, this is a really tough episode, because our culture tells us that things like that our spouse has to complete us, and I'm really going against the grain here. So, if I'm shaking up the box a little bit, or I don't know a good terminology to use, but if this is something that's hitting home for you, then just take it little by little and say, okay, does my wife complete me? Do I agree with Chris? And you may not agree with me. And if you don't, then that's okay. That's, your choice. I'm not going to tell you what you must believe. I'm going to tell you what I think you should believe, or at least the view that you should have. But, I'll let you make your decision on what views you actually have. So, for the sake of not rambling too much further, and me letting the cat out the bag, that I didn't really have many notes prepared for this particular episode, I'll go ahead and end it there and just say, find a way to be a friend with your wife, because when you become friends with your wife, you become more fulfilled in your marriage, and you bring more value to the marriage as a whole. And so does your wife. So, previous episodes you can find in the description box below, or the show notes. So if you want to go back and listen to the first 8 episodes, you can find those down in the description box, or you can just go over to my Spotify page, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find the last 8 episodes. So with that, I want you guys to find a way to love your wife every day. Peace.